Thank you very much.
How are you?
Very good.
I want to get into the film now in a minute, but first, I mean, this is a film about Pablo Neruda, one of the most famous poets of our time, even though he's not necessarily portrayed solely as a poet in this film, and that's what I'll get to. But I wanted to start out by asking, what's special about his poetry to you?
Well, he's an obligated lecturer for anyone that is born within the Spanish-speaking world. You know? I mean, you encounter him in high school, and you actually stop a while with him. Like they go deep into his world, because he is the emblem of a whole generation of poets all over the world and of artists all over the world that were very political, that were politicians in profession as well, and at the same time combined it with the defense and the allegory of contradictions and human condition and ambiguity that poetry has. So at the same time, they were incredibly idealistic and very militant. Pablo Neruda was a member of the Communist Party, and a senator. At the same time, they were observing the intricacies and the complexity of human conditions. So it was an interesting time for politicians, and I think by doing this film, I'm actually realizing a lot as well. Like there's countless of people like him all over the world that worked in government that actually changed many things, and most of the freedoms that we can enjoy now are thanks to that long-term proposals and long-term emotion that they could channel with their poetry through the politics.
Any particular poems stand out in your mind as being special to you?
There's many. There's Canto General, which is the one that he was writing in the period that where the film takes place, which is 47, 49, right before as he was running into exile.
Yeah.
And it is an incredible poem, long. I mean, it's a compilation of many poems. I mean, it's a poem, but it is also like an accumulation of poems that basically they describe the situation of Latin America in those days, and that excites and moves people to act, and to be part of a movement to achieve equality, which is one of the biggest challenges humanity has faced.
If you're listening to this interview right now, you may think this is a biopic, like a biography of Pablo Neruda, but it's really not. In fact, the director of this film has described it as the anti-biopic, an anti-bio. What does that mean?
I don't know, because actually also I don't want to reduce
What do you think it means?
Yeah, I don't want to reduce it to a single. I mean, I always say something really weird just to spice it up. Like I think it's psychedelic cumbia surf movie.
Yeah. But what does it mean?
That, it's just strange. We encounter ourselves in the Nerudian world, where we take certain elements from reality, but then we just completely invent the whole thing.
Yeah.
We grab certain anecdotes. For example, Neruda used to love reading crime novels, for example, and we take that for the chase, and for the thing. I mean, we kind of exploit that in a sense. We take a Nerudian attitude towards reinvention, and to live many lives within many lives, within your own life. Sorry. I think it is a very exciting movie that people who go to see it will not know what they're going to encounter, because there's no definition really for it. It has elements of thriller, it has elements of film noir, of western, of a classical cat and mouse chase. I don't know. There's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of lightness as well, and all of a sudden, without knowing, you're sunk into a poem. Into a weird poem of Neruda.
Yeah, you do come away with it like that. Your character is interesting because it is grounded, at least in reality. It's grounded into the story of Pablo Neruda for at least 2-3 years of his life in Chile. But your character is completely made up.
Yeah.
It is a inspector, really with a full hat and and trench coat and real gumshoe, chasing after Pablo Neruda. So by putting a fictional person into the story of someone's real life, what do you gain by that?
Well, we wanted to play many games in this film, of course.
Really?
One of them was the fact that there was a persecutor of Neruda. There were many persecutors of Neruda actually when the whole situation for real happened, when the Communist Party was abolished, or rather, communists started to get persecuted in Chile, and we take from there like those elements, but we convert them into something crazy. There was an inspector called Óscar Peluchonneau, which is if you come up with that name in fiction, nobody believes you.
It's a stuffed animal.
It's crazy, yeah, stuffed animal.
But it would translate to it like
all of a sudden, like Óscar Peluchonneau. What a fantastic name, for a policeman.
Right.
And from there we just invent the whole thing up to the point that we play amongst the many lectures that can be taken from it. Neruda builds his persecutor. Neruda constructs his persecutor as his nemesis, as his biggest, contradiction, which is the person that the poems should arrive to, because he's a son of a prostitute. He is a bastard son that his father never recognized him. Blah blah blah, all those things. The poetry of Neruda should really go into him, and he should be part, but he's actually not listening to Neruda's poetry. Neruda construct this character so as to portray this nemesis that he could be, and therefore his enemy is very noble, and whilst the character that I play is trying to grab Neruda so as to make a name for himself, Neruda is also realizing that he's going in exile so as to make a name for himself as well. It is all a very literary, fictional, metaphysical kind of sort of journey that we do in the film, and of course that's what films are for.
Pablo Neruda is seen to have needed the inspector as much as the inspector needs Pablo Neruda.
Exactly.
And what is meant by that?
Well, there is a big motor in life called opposition, no?
Yeah.
That who you oppose, and sometimes you have to build that opposition. Maybe there is nothing. Maybe there is no opposition, and you have to build it on your own, and you have to create it. And that opposition might be yourself, and therefore you create an alter ego, a Pygmalion, somebody that it's a literary game that's been played many times, in novels and the construction of poetry. Remember, it's not linear. It's on many levels, and Neruda wrote like that. One of his most incredible writings is his memoirs called Confieso que he vivido, which I think it translates to I confess I have lived, and it is his only narrative work. And it's fantastic to read it because it's like a long poem. It's a long, beautiful, simple, linear poem.
One of the more important scenes in the film, and I know this isn't giving anything away, but the film kind of explores Pablo Neruda as a very complicated man. He's seen sometimes as a champagne communist, someone who wants equality but is living a very good life. And one of the scenes is where someone who comes up to him, and it's certainly a working class, perhaps poor, and she comes up to him and she says, "You say you want everyone to live equally. Do you want everyone to live like me, or do you want everyone to live like you?"
Yeah.
I know you weren't in that scene, but there is that is one of the really striking moments, and I'm wondering, when you saw that scene and when you read that scene, what did you take away from it?
Well, it's one of the biggest. If we have to pick 5 of struggles of humanity, one of them of the 20th century is equality. At that point, straight after the Second World War, the triumph of communism was an opportunity, and was a system that actually was proving to provide an equality at that point. That's why it was everywhere. That's why it started to flourish as well, and there were many contradictions. There were many expectations, high expectations as well, and there were many things that were already getting, broken. And at the same time, it didn't live up to its whole promise, on many levels. On many levels it did. On many others it didn't. And this is the time where this is taking place. So that she's asking a question that is a completely natural question even now.
Yeah.
How do we? What is the equality that we need? Like to live like everybody being able to eat meat. Do we all need meat? I mean, to put it in simple terms,
whose equality is it?
Do we? Humanity needs to eat red meat all the time. For example, it is an interesting question. Or should we just not eat it? All of us, nobody's allowed because we can't have that inequality. I don't know. It is an interesting discussion that is man. It's just. It's not never ending because there's certain things that we need to act on as a whole, so as to understanding what we understand now about how the world is and understanding also this feeling that we don't need much to be equal and to be happy, but it's definitely the best of the searches, the common good.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Q. My name's Tom Power. My guest today is actor Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays the inspector in the new film Neruda, all about the not just poetic life, but political life of Pablo Neruda. And again, this film is not necessarily about Pablo Neruda, the poet, but as you mentioned, his poetry featers throughout. He reads it. It's a really beautiful moment.
It's Nerudian movie.
and he literally does read some of his poems throughout the film. I read this, that you had said early in the film that you were concerned maybe a film about poetry can potentially be a death sentence. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, because poetry in its literal form is already it's already colored in a way. That's why sometimes an incredible poem, it's hard to find the music that you put into the poem, sometimes, I mean, or if sometimes you take the literal word and you take Strawberry Fields Forever out of the music, then it sounds like the dumbest thing. I mean, like it just sounds, or I don't know.
There's a context.
There is no. It's how you put it. I mean, the poem is a construction in itself, and film, the semiotic language, the juxtaposition of images is a poem by itself, and it should be a poem right now, especially these days that we live, where there's great television being done in terms of long-lasting, expanding narratives where it's character-driven, and there you have or context-driven, but there is a linear thing. So let's say that TV is novels and film is poetry now. And film should be poetry. It should be experimental. It should be a cinematic experience. It's not about the story itself. And therefore, if you put the literary word of poetry into films, it sounds like you're putting bread with bread.
Right.
Like you're putting merengue with merengue, like ice cream with another ice cream, but a similar flavor. It's just it's not the same. But what happens in this film, and what amazes me, is that somehow Guillermo Calderón and Pablo Larraín managed to put you into a Nerudian world. And once you're already soft and kind of enjoying the journey and everything, you realize you're being in a poem, and you realize you're inside a literary poem, and you listen to the poetry like you were listening to it for the first time. I've got to say that having done this movie, but also looking at it, I have different lectures within the film itself, where the certain poems that I used to take for granted, like for example, podría escribir los versos más tristes esta noche. I could write the saddest verses this night. I mean, obviously, I'm doing a literal translation. It's not.
Sure. No.
It sounds better in the way he wrote it.
Right.
But if you read that and in the context of the film, it acquires different meaning, and it is the beginning of a it is like the invocation of creation in a way, that line. And it is a poem. It is the beginning of a poem that everyone who's grown up speaking Spanish knows, because it is the poem that they would give us at school. I mean, amongst many other poems, but that's one of his most incredible poems. Does that make sense?
No, it really does. I do want to close with touching on that, though, because I want to speak about the idea of the common thread. And so you're playing Oscar, the inspector in this new film. You've been in Each Tambien, you've been in The Motorcycle Diaries, you've been in No, you've been in Rosewater. I also want to mention Mozart in the Jungle, which is the dominant favorite TV show of a lot of people in this building, and I'm very, very excited.
Oh, great!
But I'm wondering, what's the common thread here? Just to close off with you as an actor, what's the thing that you found in this film that you find in the other films that you look for in your new films? What's the one important thing you're looking for when you're choosing a role?
Oh man, I don't have the answer.
No,
and I wish somebody.
So when you
would say, just because it's interesting to hear the different lectures that one might have. I mean, I might have suspicions about certain things and certain unity, but
what do you mean?
Yeah, like I mean, I might be suspicious, like oh, maybe I'm doing this because of this, and there's stuff you think about whilst before going to the bathroom or something.
Yeah,
but then I don't have a very clear idea of that. There's also a lot of flow in this, and I contain multitudes in a way. I mean, I am also like contradictory within myself, and so. Whenever I don't know, it would be nice to hear what there is something about before with the characters that they were that I could tell there was a coincidence in a search in a let's say loss of innocence, like a search for identity in a way that most of the characters have, but hell, that's me, that's the basic of all stories, It's like so. But maybe that is something. This kind of urge to exist, maybe.
If anyone has any ideas, feel free to write in and let you know.
Them. Exactly, post them and put them out there and let's vote.
Hey, thanks so much for coming in today, man.
Thank you very much.
This has been a real pleasure.
The same.